I'd like to welcome Ambassador Victoria Nuland, former Assistant Secretary of State for European and Eurasian Affairs, and Michael Daniel, former Special Assistant to the President and Cybersecurity Coordinator at the White House. I thank both of you for making the time for us today. Today's hearing is the next step in our efforts to fully investigate and explain how Russia interfered in the 2016 U.S. elections, how we reacted, and more importantly, what we learned. Earlier this year, the committee moved quickly to discuss with the American people the threat to the voting system, and we welcomed legislation that sent urgent assistance to the states. We've thoroughly reviewed the intelligence community assessment on Russia interference produced in November of 17, and all the sources that underpin it, and held a closed hearing with the agency directors responsible for that product. The committee's ready to finalize our assessment of the Obama administration's response to the Russian interference, and today's hearing will be the first of a series of several capstone events. We've invited Ambassador Rice and her deputies to join us in a few weeks. We've also invited former leaders from the FBI and the Department of Justice to testify again in July. Today, Ambassador Nuland and Mr. Daniel have joined us for this important hearing. You sat on different sides of the same policy debate. Mr. Daniel sat atop the government's cyber apparatus, seeing indicators of Russian hacking activity unfold, both here in the U.S. as well as in countries like Germany and Ukraine. Meanwhile, Ambassador Nuland sat at the State Department watching Moscow aggressively pursue its interest in Ukraine, Syria, and elsewhere. Russia's interests and methods were a carryover from the old Soviet Union that we knew, but with a new twist. The Kremlin began to use social media, hack and leak operations, and quasi-governmental agencies to discredit enemies and to weaken adversaries. Ambassador, you and your team at State were well-versed in the Russian toolkit, and you understand Putin's political will to use those tools. In effect, to use the metaphor, each of our witnesses was touching a different part of the same elephant. Today, we'd like to know when the bigger picture emerged and how policymakers responded. Did they seek to deter Russia from undermining our democratic institutions? Did they take action? If not, what held them back? We as a committee have benefited from the insight of many from the Obama administration. I'd like to thank them publicly today on behalf of the committee for coming voluntarily to talk to our staff and for their candid interviews and testimony. They consistently said that they were operating in the summer and fall of 2016 without a playbook. This was a new threat with an undefined set of rules. It seemed they struggled to balance competing priorities. They wanted to warn the Russians to stop interfering, but avoid the appearance that the White House was putting a thumb on the political scale during an election year. They wanted to warn the public about Russia's efforts, but not carry Russia's water for them. They wanted the states to rapidly secure voting systems, but not alienate state election officials or undermine public confidence. We can look back with the benefit of time and distance and talk about what could have been done. As we do so, we must also look forward a few short months to 2018 elections and forward a few more short years to the 2020 elections. More broadly, we now realize that the Russian campaign was to fracture our society and cause general discord using all the tools that our technologically connected society offers. With that, Ambassador Nuland, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Burr. Thank you, Vice Chairman Warner, members of this committee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the policy response to Russian malign influence in U.S. politics. As a citizen, as a 32-year veteran of the U.S. diplomatic service, and as a regular target of Russian active measures, I want to commend the leadership of this committee and all its members for your thoroughness and your integrity in pursuing your investigation into Russia's involvement in the 2016 elections. I especially commend the bipartisan spirit with which you've done your work, which sets a powerful example in this country. When I testified before you in classified session last summer, I put forward a number of recommendations regarding how the U.S. government could organize itself and work with the private sector to expose, deter, and defeat this threat to our national security and our democracy. Rather than going backwards into history, I'm going to focus my remarks on what we can do. Since then, many of the ideas that I put forward a year ago have been advocated publicly by others, including the Atlantic Council, the Alliance for Securing Democracy at the German Marshall Fund, the Belfer Center at Harvard, and in the Minority Report of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Russia, meanwhile, has not stopped its efforts to divide our society and use our open system against us to spread false narratives. There's every reason to believe the Kremlin will again target our elections this fall and in 2020. Our major technology companies, whose platforms they exploit, have all taken some countermeasures, but not enough. Other countries and malign actors are now adopting and improving on Russia's methodology. China, for example, now runs disinformation campaigns and influence operations in Taiwan, Australia, and other neighboring countries, and is working to acquire information technology assets and data sets across Asia, Europe, and the United States. While the Trump administration has taken some important sanction steps to punish Russia for past actions, strengthened cyber command, and hardened our electoral infrastructure, it has not launched the kind of presidentially led whole-of-government effort that's needed to protect our democracy and security from malign state actors who are intent on weaponizing information and the Internet. We must urgently put the policies, the funding, and the systems in place to speed our ability to identify malicious activity, call it out, and take countermeasures, to sharpen our deterrence toolbox so our adversaries know that they will face crippling consequences, to improve regulatory and legal standards to close the space that bad actors exploit, and to lead a global campaign with allies and partners to expose and defeat this threat together. Today, I put forward 5 steps to protect our democracy, improve deterrence, and blunt this new weapon in the hands of any of our adversaries. First, on the President's direction and with congressional support, the Trump administration could immediately establish a multi-agency fusion center modeled on the National Counterterrorism Center, but smaller in size, to pull together all of the information and resources of our government, classified and open source, to identify, expose, and respond to state-sponsored efforts to undermine American democracy through disinformation, cyber attack, and abuse of the Internet. All the relevant intelligence and national security agencies should be represented, as should the Treasury Department, the Justice Department, and other agencies who have knowledge about how dirty money and criminality often fuel these activities, and with the tools to help with deterrence. As this committee knows, much of our problem in responding strongly and quickly enough in 2016 stemmed from insufficient integration of information and policy options among government agencies, which led to delays in attribution, slow response times, and debates about the right overt and covert tools to apply. Second, the White House could establish and host a standing U.S. public-private commission to combat Internet abuse and disinformation, inviting participation by all the major U.S. technology companies with vulnerabilities and equities, the academic community, and the private forensic experts in this space. The Commission would be charged with developing technical, regulatory, and legal recommendations to protect the integrity of the Internet user experience and blunt the ability of malign state actors to suborn democracy through the Internet. Done right, this commission could provide a protected space for private sector stakeholders to share information and experience with each other and with the government, and to collaborate on responses and build campaigns of common action. Third, and flowing from the second recommendation, the U.S. government has to better advise, advocate for, and protect U.S. companies when they do take bold and commercially costly action to stand up to state sponsors of malign influence at home and abroad. In weighing when and how to act, our companies often face the threat of retaliation against their staffs and their platforms, stiff fines, or even the closure of their operations in countries that practice the dark arts of cyber and Internet abuse. Our companies need a place at State, at Commerce, in this new commission to seek advice, pre-coordination, and rapid support from the U.S. government when they take decisions to resist foreign government pressure, when they close malign accounts, and when they expose anti-democratic tactics. Fourth, the President could appoint an international coordinator to launch and lead a campaign to multilateralize our efforts in this space with America's closest allies and partners, in line with the President's national security strategy, which highlights the dangers to the U.S. and our allies from this threat. Fifth and finally, the administration could put forward, and the Congress could support, a significant budget increase to strengthen U.S. capabilities in this area. The funding should be targeted to appropriate U.S. agencies to strengthen their forensic capability, shorten attribution timelines, improve the government's ability to expose and debunk truly fake news in real time, broaden public outreach to and education of the American people about these threats, and strengthen our stable of national experts in the field. In the coming year, the Center for a New American Security, which I lead, plans to join the community of think tanks working on these issues. We will put special emphasis on pulling together the best minds in industry, academia, and government to craft full-spectrum deterrence strategies against malign state actors in the cyber realm. This work can't replace the responsibility of federal and state government, but we hope it will help inform wise choices. Again, thank you for inviting me to appear before you today.